This video is about solving absolute value equations, but before we try to solve the first absolute value equation, I would like to review the absolute value real quick. So may I have your attention on the right hand side of the screen. So absolute value means making a negative value positive. For example, I have absolute value of -9, that is equals to 9. Absolute value of -8 is 8. Absolute value of -1/2 is a half. Absolute value of -0.35 is positive 0.35. And then absolute value of 0, so 0 is neither positive nor negative, so absolute value of 0 is just equals to 0. And then another way to explain absolute value is calling the distance between the indicated value and 0. So for example, I color coded this. So absolute value of -3 is 3. Absolute value of +2 is equals to 2. Alright, so let's take a look. So -3, the absolute value of -3 is equals to 3. Why is that equals to 3? Because the distance between -3 and 0 is 3. 3 what? We make 3 steps to 0. It is easier to use integer to explain this. So starting at -3, you go 1 step, 2 step, 3 step to reach 0. Starting at +2, you go 1 step, 2 step to reach to 0. So that's why I color coded the +3 and the -3 and the +2. Alright, so another way to explain the absolute value is using absolute value of an integer, of a number, that is absolute value of a, that is equals to +a. If a is greater than or equal to 0, that is equals to -a if a is less than 0. So let's say the absolute value of 5. So in this problem, I left 5 equals to 8. So since 5 is greater than 0, that is just equals to 5 itself. And then in the next one, I use absolute value of -10. So if you just compare the absolute value of a and the absolute value of -10, you can see that I just let a equals to -10. So that is going to equal to, I put the negative in red. I plug in the -10, so -10, then you get a +10. So the absolute value of -10 is +10. So that's how the absolute value works. But we are trying to put the absolute value in equations like this. So we have absolute value of 2x plus 4 equals to 10 in absolute value. So how do we do this? So the way we do this is we break this down into two equations. Pretty easy. So the first equation, you just remove the absolute value. 2x plus 4 equals to 10. So that is just the first line. Absolute value of a is equals to a. We only remove the absolute value. How about the second line? The second line is you first remove the absolute value, 2x plus 4, and then that is equals to -10. So basically, instead of writing -10, I think it is more clear to say -1 times 10. I usually call this negative the other side. You put a negative on the other side, or -1 times the entire right hand side. Okay, and then you solve it. So you have 2x, so you know how to solve equations, right? So we subtract 4 on both sides. 10 minus 4 is equals to 6, and then you divide 2 on both sides. So x is equals to 6 divided by 2 is equals to 3. And then on the other hand, you have 2x equals to -10 minus 4, so that is -14. This is a 2x, divide 2 on both sides, you have x equals to -7. What is the conjunction between 3 and -7? We use an or, because when you select an x value for this equation, you can select either x equals to 3 or x equals to -7. So these answers, they fit into the equation. Alright, so let's go over the next one. The next one is actually a pretty quick problem. So let's use a different color for that. So how about this? How about absolute value x minus 5 equals to -2? Shall we proceed to the next step and break this down into two equations? Shall we? Most people will just go ahead, okay, I will just do remove the absolute value, negative x, I mean positive x minus 5 equals to negative 2, and then when you negative the right hand side, you have x minus 5 equals to positive 2. You can do that, but one thing that I can tell you is after you solve the equation, you will reach to the two different x values. When you plug it in, none of this will work. Do you see why? It doesn't matter what x value you plug in. You can get those x value using algebra, like remove the absolute value, like exactly like what I did. Remove the absolute value and then just negative the other side. You can do that. You can reach to two different x value. Yes, that is fine. But when you do the plug-in, none of them will work. Do you know why? Here is why. What is the absolute value for? The absolute value is for making this indicated value positive. Is negative 2 positive? No, it is not positive. That means it doesn't matter what x value you pick for the x. I don't care you get a positive or negative, because once you take an absolute value, you will either get a 0 or positive. If you let x equals to 5, then this is a 0. If you let x be something extremely big or negative extremely small, you will get a positive. So it doesn't matter what x value you choose, you will either get a 0 or positive. This is negative 2. So that means this equation has no solution. So this equation has no solution, because the absolute value of non-zero is always positive. The absolute value of 0 is 0. You won't get negative 2 because there is an absolute value. So that is for the second equation. So when you see this kind of problem, don't just go ahead and calculate x. Okay, moving on to the next one. The next one, let's do one that is more complicated. How about 6 minus absolute value of 3x minus 1 equals to 2? The reason I put this one is because you want to clean up everything outside of the absolute value. So let's which is you can subtract 6 on both sides. Okay, so after you subtract 6, you have negative absolute value 3x minus 1, 2 minus 6 is negative 4, and then you say, okay, no. Absolute value can never be negative. This one has no solution. But don't forget that there is a minus in front of that. This minus means a negative. You can take that as a negative, because once you define negative 1 on both sides, the negative 1 will be gone. The negative in front of the absolute value will be gone. So you have absolute value 3x minus 1 equals to positive 4. Positive, so now we can continue. 3x minus 1 equals to 4, and then 3x minus 1 negative the other side, which is negative 4, or negative 1 times 4. Okay, so 3x, add 1 on both sides, and then divide 3 on both sides. So you have 5 over 3. You can box that. And then 3x equals to negative 4 plus 1. This is a negative 3. This is a 3x. So x is equals to negative 1. So when you pick correct answer for x, either pick 5 over 3 or negative 1. So that is for the third equation. Okay, let's discuss one more, and then we will move on to something else. The last one, let's play with some fraction, shall we? I know everybody hates fraction. Let's play with some fraction. What color should I choose? Let me choose orange. So this one is negative 2 over 3, absolute value 4x minus 3, close that, plus 1 equals to negative 3. Let's clean up the positive 1, the negative 2/3 before we break this down into two equations. So first of all, you subtract 1 on both sides, right? Minus 1, minus 1. Negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. You have negative 2 over 3, absolute value 4x minus 3. Okay, how do we get rid of the negative 2/3? You use reciprocal, right? So you multiply both sides by negative 3 over 2. negative 3 over 2, of course, is a multiplication. On the other side, you have a positive 12 divided by 2 is a positive 6. And then this side, the fraction is gone. You have 4x minus 3. Make sure the other side is positive. Otherwise, there is no solution. Okay, positive, break this down into two equations. 4x minus 3 equals to 6. You have 4x, you add 3 on both sides, and then you divide both sides by 4. So the answer is 9 over 4. And then on the other side, you have 4x minus 3. You negative the other side, so you have negative 1 multiply the entire right-hand side. So you have 4x equals to negative 6 plus 3, which is a negative 3. And then this side is still a 4x, and then you have x equals to negative 3 over 4. All right. Then, okay. I don't want to make this video too long. I have two more examples where there is an absolute value on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. So how do we take care of those situations? All right. So if this is something that you would like to watch, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. I will meet you all in the next video. Signing out.